They said it started with a scream that tore through the quiet streets of Merrow's End on a cold October night, echoing off brick walls and shuttered windows. A scream that left every resident frozen in their homes, gripping their doors and listening for what came next. And yet, when the police arrived, there was nothing. No body, no blood, no trace of a struggle. Just silence. It wasn't the first time someone in Merrow's End claimed to hear a murder. The town had a reputation, a long, strange history of unexplained noises, shadows moving where no one should be, and whispers that seemed to carry the faintest cry of terror. But the scream that night was different. It was real. Everyone agreed, and everyone swore they knew what had happened. But decades later, the mystery remains unsolved. The body was never found. The crime, if it ever happened, never confirmed. And the town, well, it never slept the same way again. This is the story of a town haunted by the sound of a crime that may never have existed, or may have been hidden far too well. The night the scream came, Merrow's End was the sort of town that existed in whispers, a place where everyone knew everyone else, or thought they did. Streets were narrow, houses were old, and at night, the fog rolled in thick from the nearby marshlands, swallowing lampposts and muting sounds. On that October night, most residents were tucked into bed. Children slept. Shops were closed. Even the stray cats had disappeared into shadows. Then came the scream. It was sharp, piercing, impossible to ignore. Windows rattled. Dogs barked. People pressed their ears to walls and floors, trying to locate its source. And almost instantly, it became clear this wasn't an accident, a prank, or an animal in distress. This was human. Neighbors later described it as a woman's voice, though some swore it sounded deeper, rougher, almost like two people struggling, one terrified, one angry. Doors were locked. Lights were turned on. Phones were dialed. And by the time the first patrol car arrived, the street was empty. Not a soul in sight. Not a trace of what caused the scream. And yet, every house that night had heard it. Every family remembered it. The consensus was chilling. Someone had died. A town full of witnesses the next morning. Merrow's End was alive with rumors. Every resident claimed to have heard something. Every account slightly different but equally urgent. Mrs. Whitmore, the baker, swore she saw a figure running from the alley behind her shop. Mr. Hargrove, the grocer, swore he smelled something acrid blood, he thought, and a door slammed violently down the street. Children claimed to see shadows flit across the fog. Yet, when the police investigated, they found nothing. No blood, no broken doors. No footprints leading anywhere. No body. But the townspeople were unanimous in their belief a murder had occurred. This collective memory created an unusual phenomenon. People began to question themselves, their neighbors, even their sanity. Were they imagining things? Was it possible that everyone had simply misheard the wind or the creaking of an old building? Almost everyone agreed on one fact. Whatever had happened, it had happened behind the closed doors of the old Whitmore warehouse at the edge of town. The warehouse had been abandoned for decades, a relic of the town's industrial past. Windows boarded, rust on the shutters, and an iron gate chained shut. Yet, that night, residents swore they had seen lights flicker inside. Flickers that could not have come from the moon or stars. Flickers that suggested movement, struggle, or perhaps someone trapped. The police investigation detectives came from neighboring towns, equipped with flashlights, cameras, and skepticism. They searched every street, every alley, and every inch of the Whitmore warehouse. Their search turned up nothing. No signs of entry, no tools, no bodies, no evidence at all. But some officers couldn't shake it. They admitted privately that the reports from residents were too consistent to ignore. Almost everyone had heard the scream. Almost everyone had seen the flickers of light. Almost everyone had noticed shadows moving. And yet, nothing. Detectives wrote it off as a cold case before it had even begun. Officially, Merrow's End had no murders that night. Unofficially, everyone knew better. The lack of evidence created tension. Fear spread quietly, the way fog spreads over the marshlands, seeping into homes, into dreams. Parents told their children to stay inside. Shops closed early. The Whitmore warehouse became a symbol of unease, a place whispered about whenever anyone dared. And the scream. It haunted Merrow's End forever. Those who claimed to hear it still described it in nearly identical words decades later, even when asked independently. A scream etched into the town's memory. Theories that never died over the years. Dozens of theories circulated, each more unsettling than the last. Some believed the scream was the result of a violent crime gone wrong, perpetrated by a drifter who vanished as quickly as he appeared. Others insisted it was tied to the warehouse itself. Perhaps it had been used for illegal operations, smuggling, gambling, or worse, and someone had silenced a witness. A third theory was darker, more supernatural. Some claimed the scream was the echo of an old murder, replaying through time. According to local legend, the warehouse had once been the site of a violent death in the 1800s, and the town's soil retained a memory of the horror, replaying it to those who were sensitive enough to hear. Yet another theory suggested that the scream was not one, but many an ongoing event that had never truly ended. Residents reported hearing strange noises over the years, particularly on foggy October nights, sounds that mirrored the scream heard decades ago. The drone that changed everything. It wasn't until the 21st century that technology entered the story. A local journalist, Michael Travers, had returned to Marrow's End after years in the city. He brought with him a drone equipped with high-resolution cameras, thermal imaging, and night vision. His goal was simple: capture footage of the abandoned warehouse for a historical piece. Flying above the warehouse one evening, Michael noticed something odd on the live feed. A faint thermal signature, like someone or something moving beneath the floorboards of the warehouse's main hall. He adjusted the camera and saw it clearly: a sunken outline, nearly rectangular, disturbed soil, as if something had been recently buried or hidden for decades. Excited and terrified, he recorded hours of footage. But when he showed the drone feed to local authorities, the footage was dismissed as a glitch. Thermal anomalies often appear in old, decaying buildings. But Michael knew better. Something was buried, something that might explain the scream. Discovery of the hidden site. With the help of volunteers and permission from the current property owners, Michael and a small team excavated beneath the warehouse. It took days, but eventually they uncovered a cavity beneath the rotting floorboards. Inside were fragments, clothing fibers, rusted metal, and human remains too decayed to identify immediately. Forensic analysis later confirmed the unthinkable: the remains belonged to a young woman, aged approximately 20 at the time of death. While decomposition and time prevented positive identification, circumstantial evidence, age, height, and items found in the cavity strongly suggested that the remains were linked to the scream that had haunted Marrow's End decades earlier. Finally, the town had proof. The scream was not imagined. The murder was real. The body had never been found because it had been hidden perfectly, almost as if the warehouse itself had been complicit. A legend revealed the discovery triggered more than just relief. It reopened old wounds, sparked new investigations, and forced the town to confront uncomfortable truths about what might have happened that night. Some residents remembered people they had been afraid to speak about. Some recalled neighbors whose behavior changed suddenly, who disappeared shortly after the scream. And some whispered that the warehouse had long been a place of secrecy, a shadowy site for the town's most feared figures. It became clear that Marrow's End had covered up the truth, whether deliberately or through decades of neglect. The scream, once dismissed as an urban legend, became a symbol, a reminder that crimes do not disappear just because a body is hidden or a town chooses to forget. They linger in memory, in fear, and in the quiet streets where whispers travel like ghosts. The legacy of fear, even today, decades after the scream, the warehouse stands, restored slightly, yet still a focal point for those who remember. On foggy nights, some residents swear they hear a sound, a scream so clear, so desperate, that it echoes across the marshlands and reminds the town of what it tried to forget. Tourists occasionally venture there, unaware of the history, snapping photos of what they assume is an abandoned building. And sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, the faintest echo of a voice drifts across the fog, so chilling, so haunting, that it makes every person pause and shiver. For Marrow's End, the scream will never fully die. It is a living memory, a shadow of a crime that forced a town to face its past, and a cautionary tale about silence, complicity, and the echoes of fear. The scream that began one October night in 1979, or perhaps decades earlier, remains a reminder. A murder may be hidden, a body may vanish, but the truth always finds a way to resurface. Some towns try to bury their secrets, some attempt to forget. Marrow's End could not, because when a crime leaves its mark on a community, it does not disappear with the body or fade from memory. It echoes, whispers, and waits, sometimes for decades, until someone brave enough to look, listen, and investigate uncovers it. The town where everyone swore they heard a murder but no body was ever found reminds us of one terrifying fact: silence does not erase wrongdoing. Memory preserves it, and sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. This has been Same Sky, bringing you stories that lurk in shadows, echo across time, and refuse to be forgotten.